Tonight, it is my privilege to present the Bob Bigelow Lifetime Achievement Award to Doug and Judy Cushing. Now, we have a committee led by Peter Glazer, and that committee is made up of Liz Hartman, oftentimes Brian Monahan, and past mayors and past recipients of the award who get together and have a well-considered discussion about people that we want to recognize for a lifetime of being there for us as a community. And so right now, Doug and Judy are amazing people. And I'll start there. I sat in their living room to try to get a little more personal information from them because I've known some of their accomplishments because I've been here too. And so what I found is they've done one hell of a lot more than I thought. But I got one good question in. How'd you meet up with each other? You know, I thought that was a good question. And there was a little bit of humor there between the two of them, and I wasn't quite sure what I was digging up. But they did explain, and I've been thinking about it ever since, that Doug was a senior. He was going off to Stanford, and it was getting late in the year, and Judy was a junior, and Doug had his eye on Judy. And so he was ready to make his move to connect. And apparently he decided, and this is where I've been pondering, he decided to invite her over to his home, I'm assuming with his parents. Yeah. So it was a little puzzling to me where a bright guy who's going to Stanford would make that kind of a move. But we know it worked out big time. So what I want to do is start with Doug and then finish with Judy, and they've both had spectacular success giving back. And so I'll start out with Doug and see what I can do not to murder his resume. But I might have to read a little bit here because I picked from a lot of things. Okay, here we go. Doug was born in Portland. He grew up in McMinnville, and he received a BA from Stanford and his law degree from Willamette. The Cushings lived in Medford for 20 years. And he was on the school board there for 10 years. And he was motivated by giving back in a particular way there, but the schools in Lake Oswego. Is Jen here? Yeah. Keep it up, gal. The schools in Lake Oswego was a draw. So they came here. And Doug continued to serve. In Medford, he was the actual president of the Oregon school boards, and he didn't join the school board here. But what he did is he's working with his law practice, and since 1990 to the present, Doug has continually served our community. One of the greatest strengths that he has is his analytical intelligence and his vision, his foresight to be able to look at things and have good sense of what to do with them and where it's going to end up if we do this and where it's going to end up as we do that. So he was on the chamber board. I know what that's like. I've been on the chamber board for 27 years when I was superintendent and a little guy. And he ended up serving as president twice because he was called by his fellow board members to fix a problem that was a significant little kerfluffle that we got into, that we who were on the board did not recognize was needing to be fixed. And so he also served on the chamber's committees and the city's committees. He was on the Development Review Board. He served 4 years as its chair. He worked on downtown redevelopment. He was working on the reconfiguration of the Weiser Block. And don't let anybody know this, but he also worked on the tree code. Okay? Now, Doug additionally is a member of the Methodist Church, and he has worked with the endowment fund for 15 years. He also served on the Stanford Alumni Board of Directors. Now I just pick some of the things he had, okay? Judy. Judy has been equally successful and took a very different path for her service. In 1990, while working with the State of Oregon Alcohol and Drug Abuse Program Office, she was asked to lead the Oregon Drug Abuse Program that Oregon Together Project, excuse me. I'm having a little difficulty with my migraines and the light tonight. Which was part of a cooperative adventure with the University of Washington. It was a research collaboration that later became the gold standard for systems prevention for kids at risk, and Lake Oswego leaders at that time who actually joined the effort and started our own community effort on that front were Les Youngbar, who's a chief of police, Alice Schlinker, and so she got that started here in our community. One of the things that Judy is really good at is getting people to work together. And she accomplished that very well. One of Judy's greatest strengths is that capability. She's a communicator and a connector as a person. And one of that strength in 1993, she co-founded the Oregon partnership called Lines for Life, offering mental health counseling, substance abuse prevention programs, and crisis support services. Lake Oswego residents who served on the board and guided its growth included Peter Journey. He's sitting right over there. And Les Youngbar, the chief of police. Then in 2000, a group of Lake Oswego students approached Judy, and their research showed that there was nobody that was building a program and had a model of students talking to students that were in crisis. And so Judy worked on that and built that with them. so that they could help fellow students. That program has grown and receives now about 35,000 calls a year of students. Now, Judy was CEO of the Oregon Partnership Alliance for Life for 23 years. She also served on the National Councils of Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. She is currently on the board of the National Alliance for Suicide Prevention in Washington. And locally, she also serves key roles in the United Methodist Church. I give you Doug and Judy Cushing, amazing people.
Thank you, Bill, and all of the other committee members. It's an honor to receive the 2025 Bob Bigelow Lifetime Achievement Award, especially jointly with Judy as we approach our 60th anniversary this coming October. So, the origin story isn't quite what Bill might have suggested. It was a Christmas party over the holiday break my senior year that I was putting on at home. And I had not had a steady girlfriend through the early part of that year for God knows what reason. But I asked her, and then it went on from there. So things happened. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Bob Bigelow. We moved to Lake Oswego in 1989, and my path and Bob's didn't cross the few short years after that before he passed away. Having attended these events for several years, it's clear he represented the real essence of community leadership, something you've heard from multiple speakers tonight that is important here. A law professor at Stanford recently, in an article addressing the issue of birthright citizenship, said, "The privilege of belonging to a community is a call to contribute to that community." Bob clearly contributed in many, many ways, even though he passed away in his 40s. I hope Judy and I approach that same level of participation and contribution. And being engaged in Lake Oswego is easy. Volunteering for city commissions, school committees, work on the chamber, work on the garden club we heard about tonight, working at the arts commission, etc. It's a no-brainer. And there are many rewards and you can pick what you want to do, and that's the thing. There isn't a regimen to follow. It was particularly easy when we moved here in '89 to meet the then principal of Lake Ridge High School, John Turchie, who was later a city council member. I don't see John here tonight. We had a good laugh because he and I had competed as hurdlers in high school back in the early 60s. And John and I taking on the hurdles today would be high jumping over them. Serving on the Design Review Commission, which I did for 6 years, taught me a lot about Lake Oswego property and what people expected, the community goals and expectations. Then I served on part of one of the early infill task forces. These were the predecessors to middle housing, which is an issue today. And this was a very challenging place to be, trying to address at that time more localized issues as to multiple site houses and that sort of thing. And they still elicit excited comments from people today. Bill mentioned the tree code. I think we developed the tree code during my time on that commission, and I'm sorry for all of you who hate us for having done it. For all of my cohorts on the chamber board, we had some interesting times. We identified a staff member who had been embezzling funds. I got to go testify to a grand jury, and she was later indicted. So I hope that all of you are as proud as I am that we have an executive director like Liz Hart. We are privileged tonight that we have our daughter Elizabeth and her partner Jill visiting from California, our son Tim, also from who is still here, and Sean, who is from also living in California, and our granddaughter Hayden with us. We'd need another table full of people if we had the other 8 grandkids here too. Our 2 older kids, Elizabeth and Tim, coped with my serving on the Medford School Board for 10 years and being involved at the state level, president of OSBA, and involved in the national level. Sean was a little bit luckier when we moved up here. He decided on Lake Ridge as the school he wanted to go to. We had limited the places that he would be able to go to school when we landed in moving up here, and Lake Oswego schools were the key reason we came here to the city at all, and he chose Lake Ridge. We believe that we've encouraged our kids well with the idea that one does have a moral obligation to leave your community a better place than you found it. We found it a good one when we came here. I think it's better today yet. And we're grateful we've had the opportunity to be here and to be involved. And we're committed to stay involved until it's no longer feasible, which, at this point I won't get voted out or something, but you never know. Thank you all again for this prestigious award. And now you hear from the true better half.
That failed to say that the real reason we moved to Lake Oswego were 1, Sean got to pick academics, 2, soccer. He went on. Sean actually went on to Stanford to play soccer. Yeah. This award holds a very special meaning for me. I'm going to try not to cry. I had the very good fortune to get to know and work with Bob Bigelow back in the 90s on the community project that Bill Korach mentioned. I was so impressed by Bob's perceptiveness, his ability to kind of navigate different waters and different personalities, his passion for Lake Oswego and its citizens, and particularly Lake Oswego kids. He had an uncanny ability, and I'm sure Peter Glazer, his good friend, will agree, to see through the distractions and get to the heart of the matter. And he did so with grace. He cared deeply about the well-being of people. We all learned a lot from Bob. And I'm still living some of those lessons. So many people have asked me, how in the world did you become involved in mental health and substance abuse prevention? That's not a very sexy thing to be involved. Well, there are people in this room whom I'm very close to who don't know the story. But our daughter, who's very perceptive, said, Mom, you should tell the story. In 1981, I learned that my nephew was suffering from severe drug addiction. His dad, my brother, was in the CIA, and they've been posted around the world and 6 different countries for 15 years. And Jeff was shy. And he, in this move from country to country, really added to his lack of self-confidence, and he began to fail. He began to turn to things he shouldn't turn to, but sometimes that happens. And he spiraled into drug abuse. I learned about a treatment program in Florida and agreed to accompany my nephew there because my brother's work wouldn't allow him to leave. Jeff worked hard. He worked very hard, and ultimately he completed treatment. I realized then what a huge need existed for young people to have access to treatment, to get help on the way there, and most of all, to try to prevent it from ever happening. And I kept thinking, what could I do to help in my community? It was a long journey that involved so many people that I was a minor player compared to the people who influenced me along the way. I love to tell you the story of the founding of Oregon Partnership, and Joanne Burdick, who is here tonight, who played the major role, is my sidekick, and worked together to co-found Oregon Partnership. And that was done as a direct result of my nephew. What you may not know is that Lake Oswego leaders played a significant force in the founding of Lions for Life. And Bill Courage mentioned some of these people. But Joanne Burdick, Mike Pittman, who at the time was Senior Vice President, Pacific Corps, Dick Smith, who lived across the street on Forest Meadows Way from Mike, played a major role, as did Les Schumbar, the police chief. Among board presidents, as Bill mentioned, were Peter Journey, David Anderson from Northwest Natural, now retired, Aaron Hubert, and Julie Elkins. So many, and many others along the way who influenced and led Oregon Partnership, now Lions for Life, in the right direction. Barbara Kaplan, who is with us this evening, led fundraising efforts that allowed us to become sustainable. That is really hard for a small nonprofit, and it took someone with the guts and the stamina of Barbara to do it. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Lions for Life's Youth Line, which wouldn't have been in existence, if it hadn't been for a group of kind of bright, pushy, positive Lake Oswego High School students, as Bill said, who came to us in 2000. They said young people needed their own crisis line. It wasn't fair that only adults had support through phone crisis lines. And when they came to me, our offices were on Barbara Boulevard, and I thought to myself, well, gosh, they have a point. So I tasked them with, I turned to think, how did they get here? They said, through government class. I said, well, it's going to take some research. Are you willing to do some research? Do you think if you asked your government teacher, he would allow you to take a project on to research how many youth lines there are in the country, what their call volume is, how many volunteers they have, and information that we'll find helpful, because we have not one penny to start this, and we need some data and information before we try to go raise some funds. They didn't blink an eye, not an eye. They came back 2 months later, armed with, they were ready to go. The results, their research results were there are 0 youth lines in the country. We would be the first. We're willing to volunteer. We're willing to recruit other volunteers. Okay, can we do it? And I said, yes, which said to me, okay, you're going to have to go out and raise some money, do something. Anyway, today, if it hadn't been for their stick-to-itiveness, their government teacher who said yes, the superintendent who would agree along the way, never would this have happened. Today, the youth line, which is run in Texas, staffed by 135 teens who are highly trained and supervised by adult counselors. The youth line has been featured nationally on National Public Television as a one-of-a-kind solution to adolescent mental health issues. I am so proud of those kids and the youth line today, and those amazing young people that came to me and weren't daunted when I said I gave them all the reasons I didn't think it would work or could happen. Because the youth line is filling a vital need, not only in this community, but in communities across the nation and actually the world. The students we have bubble map, it calls 35,000 calls and texts, and if you text 10 times, it counts as one. The youth line functions in our offices down the road on Bacadam and Warm Springs Reservation and in Central Oregon in Bend on the Oregon State campus, and soon in Maui, where young people have really suffered from the fires. As Doug mentioned, we're so proud to live in a community that gives back in so many different ways. So many of you have played a role, not only in this organization, but in so many. We are proud to be here, we're grateful to be here, and we thank you again for this honor.